right now on WESH 2.
This is an awesome time to be an astronaut with a new spacecraft, to get a chance to go and fly.
We are so excited to be in a real spaceship.
After almost a decade, astronauts will once again climb aboard a rocket at Kennedy Space Center, bound for the beyond.
You're the best that America has to offer, and we're thrilled that you're willing to take on this mission to once again return American astronauts on American rockets from American soil to the International Space Station.
Tonight, WESH 2 looks back at all it took.
At 2, 1, 0, and liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis.
To get us here. And how a space race of commercial proportions will make launches and landings look like nothing we've seen before. Ready for launch, America's return to spaceflight. WESH 2 is a go for broadcast.
Hello, I'm Jim Payne at one of the most iconic sites in all of America, Kennedy Space Center, where for decades, U.S. and world history has been written over and over. We here in Central Florida are about to have a front row seat for a new chapter in U.S. spaceflight and exploration, America's return to human spaceflight. For just the 5th time in the history of U.S. spaceflight, daring test pilots are about to fly a machine that no one has ever flown before. Not since 1981 have astronauts stepped aboard an untried spaceship. We're about to take a look at how we got here by reliving the dramatic history of the space shuttle. And who better to do this with than WESH 2 space expert Dan Billow.
Jim, you and I have watched again and again as groups of astronauts have ascended to the heavens from here, a few of them never to return. This new ship is so much different and expected to be so much safer. So let's look at a timeline of one space shuttle launch through landing and let that serve as a parallel for the history of the whole space shuttle program and our transition to the Dragon. Standing underneath the fire-breathing main engines of the space shuttle, a final inspection team helps us begin our journey through the space shuttle's history. It's just hours from launch, and orange-suited engineers walk through the cold vapors of the launch pad to make sure everything's ready, everything's normal.
Final inspection team is complete, and we'll be rolling back to AB-11.
As our countdown clock nears 0, we remember the late John Young, along with Bob Crippen, the 2 astronauts who would risk their lives to prove that a rocket ship glider riding piggyback on its own fuel tank with extra rockets strapped to the sides could really fly. If the 8.5-minute ride to space can represent the entire history of the space shuttle program, Young and Crippen's flight would come at T0.
Columbia, Houston, you guys did so good, we're going to let you stay up there for a couple of days. Your goal for on orbit.
Being the so-called rookie on this flight, I had a thrill from the moment of liftoff all the way up to what we're doing now.
That first flight headed toward space in 1981 and demonstrated that astronauts could survive in this space buggy. But it was a delicate and cantankerous machine. And if the shuttle's history is condensed into one launch, then 1986 would hit roughly at the time the booster rockets separate.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission. And
at about this time in the Space Shuttle's history, 7 astronauts, including civilian school teacher Krista McAuliffe, perished in a fireball just after liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center. The space shuttle would not fly again for 2.5 years. But when it did fly, it would chalk up a series of remarkable achievements. On our condensed timeline, the beginning of the Hubble Space Telescope repair and servicing flights would start about 3 minutes after liftoff.
Mike Massimino's reflection in the aft shroud of the Hubble Space Telescope as he prepares to open the doors.
The space shuttle was the first vehicle that allowed spacewalking astronauts to put their hands on a satellite racing around the Earth at 25 times the speed of sound and repair or improve the satellite. Hubble's amazing discoveries and startling views of the universe are due to the courage and skill of space shuttle astronauts.
Liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
As our ride to space reaches its halfway point, John Glenn, the great Mercury astronaut, flies on the shuttle, and not long afterward, NASA uses the space shuttle to launch and build the first elements of its greatest project, the International Space Station. We're more than halfway there now, and once again, 7 shuttle astronauts perish in a fiery crash. This time over Texas, the space shuttle Columbia breaks up on its way home from a mission. And after 2.5 more years, the shuttle flies again, its job now almost exclusively the completion of the space station. And now, more than 8 minutes into our flight that represents the shuttle's lifetime, more history is made, but not by a space shuttle and not by astronauts. In 2010, little noticed by the world, a rocket called Falcon 9 launched from the Cape for the first time. An upstart company founded by a brash young internet millionaire started launching and later landing its rockets, sometimes 2 at a time. It was something the space establishment said couldn't be done and wasn't worth doing anyway. The establishment was wrong.
Now standing by for external tank separation. Atlantis off the tank.
We've reached the end of our ride to space and the shuttle's lifetime. The Space Shuttle's 135th and last mission launched in July of 2011. The shuttle's amazing run had lasted 30 years. Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, with their delicate, complicated architecture and their armies of workers, would write history no more. But in less than a year, SpaceX's Falcon 9 would already be sending its Dragon spaceship to the space station.
Capture is confirmed.
It was a step towards simplicity and safety. A rocket designed to be rugged, simple, and cheap had launched an unoccupied capsule big enough for 7 people and sent it to the space station. NASA and SpaceX hoped they could be flying astronauts by 2015.
I was hired in 2002, actually as the chief salesperson, so I certainly hoped that we would work with NASA. I knew when I joined the team that NASA wanted to build a space transportation system that was reliable enough and low cost enough for people to be able to go to other planets. So I've seen this company grow from roughly 10 employees to the thousands that we have now. We've grown up. It was a little Wild West early on, but candidly, I think that those beginnings and those roots are critically important to our success.
A look inside the Dragon shows that its designers care about looks as well as performance. It is designed to inspire and designed to be safe and simple. The Dragon has its own powerful thrusters, capable of shooting it skyward all by itself in case an accident on the launch pad threatens the safety of the astronauts. The capsule's parachutes allow it to land softly in the water where its crew would await rescue. That scenario came to life the very next year. An explosion during a fueling test destroyed a Falcon 9 and a satellite. There was no one on board, but the blast demonstrated what could happen during a countdown. Even modern rockets can explode. The Dragon is designed to carry astronauts safely up and away, even in an accident like this. They say it's like having an ejection seat, and they need one while the rocket is being loaded with fuel down below them.
At about 45 minutes prior, we'll arm what's called the launch escape system so that fueling operation can begin. And so I would say that there certainly is a different level of nervousness. I think for both Doug and I, nervousness is not the right word. It's a different level of awareness once we get the ejection seat, if you will, armed of the vehicle while it starts the tanking process. And to sit on that ejection seat for that 45 minutes through the tanking operation leading up to launch is something that we're used to doing in airplanes.
But the Dragon's safety systems extend far beyond the launch pad. In fact, the rocket can perform that escape maneuver anywhere on the way up between Earth and space. In January of this year, a remarkable and unprecedented test. SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 carrying a Dragon capsule. Intentionally, on the way up, the rocket's engines shut down. The capsule fired its thrusters and separated, and the rocket exploded.
Okay, you just saw a bright flash there.
Astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley were right there watching, no doubt imagining themselves in the capsule.
The thing for me is this vehicle has end-to-end abort capability, on the pad all the way up to orbit. And so that perspective for me is huge compared to shuttle, where there were what we called black zones, where there were scenarios where it didn't really matter. If you had the right combination of failures, you were likely not going to survive.
The safety carries with it an interesting trade-off, the possibility of long launch delays. It's a trade that's worth it, but could make the Falcon-Dragon combo almost as hard to get off the ground as the space shuttle was.
I would expect there to be a very high chance of scrub.
That's because the weather has to be good almost anywhere on Earth the astronauts could make an emergency landing. And launch windows will be 1 second long, leaving no time to wait for weather to clear. Another safety system for the astronauts is their spacesuits, fashionable in snappy black and white.
These are suits that are designed to keep you safe while you're still in the vehicle in case there's a loss of atmosphere. It is one piece so that you don't have pieces of your suit kind of floating away, a glove floating off and getting lost. And then of course it looks cool. And again, just like the interior of Dragon, it's important that the suits are comfortable and also are inspiring. As we see the astronauts walk out to the pad and be in their vehicle and do everything that they do in the suits, it's something that we want to make sure is very inspiring as well.
Maybe we've forgotten some of that after 9 years, the way a space shuttle banking toward the runway inspired us with its grace.
Houston, Atlantis. Field in sight at 10,000 feet.
The way the astronauts faced danger every time they climbed aboard, and conquered it every time they landed.
The space shuttle pulls into port for the last time.
The goal is for NASA to be a customer.
Up next, the race to be the first to launch astronauts again is about more than making history. It's about making money, the companies cashing in, and what's on the horizon.
Welcome back. The launch of the Dragon spacecraft will be the true dawn of a new era of spaceflight, the commercial age. This is spaceflight for profit. But with all the big personalities and thrilling displays, Dan, the technological dogfight that's gone on to win the title of first has been something to behold.
It really has, Jim. We've witnessed some spectacular innovation, but it's more than just a battle for bragging rights. Significant government dollars are on the line. Here's what commercial spaceflight really means and how the race to be first has unfolded. July 21st, 2011. Space Shuttle Commander Chris Ferguson, followed by Space Shuttle pilot Doug Hurley, stepped down to the runway minutes after landing Atlantis on the final shuttle flight. Hurley was the number 2 man on that flight. Now it appears he'll beat Ferguson back into space on the next. Hurley is the spacecraft commander for SpaceX's Dragon crew capsule. Ferguson will be the commander for Boeing's competing Starliner. Spaceflight is now a profit-making enterprise, and competition is part of it.
NASA used to build and own the rocket. They managed the program to get Americans to low Earth orbit in the International Space Station. Now, the model is going over to not just delivering cargo to low Earth orbit commercially, like the FedEx of space, but also delivering crew there as well, providing them rides back and forth to low Earth orbit. And this enables the NASA mission, which is to go beyond low Earth orbit.
So SpaceX and Boeing are making billions providing a space taxi service. The taxpayer is supposed to be the winner in this competition because it's intended to make spaceflight cheaper. How's that working out? NASA is paying Boeing $4.6 billion for up to 6 operational flights to the space station. NASA's paying SpaceX $3.1 billion for another 6 flights. SpaceX gets less money because its vehicles are cheaper to build and fly. Boeing gets more money because the government wants 2 separate operators. If one goes down, the other is still available. On a per-seat basis, according to the NASA Inspector General, that means we're paying Boeing $90 million per astronaut per flight. We're paying SpaceX $55 million. Are we saving money? We've been paying Russia roughly $80 million a seat for its Soyuz spacecraft. Estimating shuttle costs over 30 years is tricky, but $71 million a seat in non-inflation adjusted dollars is a reasonable figure. So, looking at the last 40 years, Boeing is setting a record for the highest cost per seat, and SpaceX is setting a record for the lowest.
We're very pleased with the level of investment that we've made, what we're getting for that investment, but we're also very hopeful for the future as well. Again, the goal is for NASA to be a customer.
As for efficiency, both companies are now 5 years behind schedule, and Boeing's going to make it 6. The rocky road to commercial spaceflight is littered with unsuccessful first tries, funding shortfalls, mistakes, and broken promises. SpaceX founder Elon Musk pioneered the reusable rocket. It wasn't easy at first. It took a while, but he believes recovering a rocket instead of throwing it away is critical.
I think it's another step towards the stars. In order for us to really open up access to space, we've got to achieve full and rapid reusability. And being able to do that for the primary rocket booster is I think, going to be a huge impact on cost.
The company has had its share of accidents and explosions, always forging ahead afterward and learning from its mistakes, but paying a price in lost time. There was that huge launch pad explosion in 2016, one that shook the ground and rattled windows in much of Brevard County. Another SpaceX Falcon 9 had blown up in flight in 2015. And one of the company's biggest failures happened just last year and left a toxic orange cloud over the Cape, visible for miles. What was supposed to have happened was a firing of the Dragon capsule's escape rockets, the ones that would save the astronauts' lives in a launch abort scenario. Instead, the capsule exploded. The failure cost the company at least a year.
You have to learn those hard lessons, and I think sometimes the aerospace industry shies away from failure in the development phase. It looks bad politically, it's tough, and the media certainly makes a lot out of failures, but candidly, that's the best way to learn.
Parachutes have bedeviled both companies. The Dragon capsule lands under parachutes, which must deploy in a complex sequence. It was only this month, in the 27th test, that the Dragon's parachute system was okayed for human spaceflight.
Ignition, liftoff.
Perhaps SpaceX's biggest success so far was a launch to the space station just over a year ago. A Falcon 9 rocket carried the Dragon capsule and a simulated astronaut named Ripley more than 220 miles high to the space station. The mission was a triumph from beginning to end, with a splashdown not far from the Cape that triggered memories of Apollo. That kind of mission is something the more expensive Boeing Starliner has not been able to pull off. Boeing has had troubles with its crew ship that mirror some of SpaceX's problems. A year ago, the company finally got the capsule's thrusters to work properly after issues with leaks that set everything back. Time after time, Boeing has told us it would be ready soon, as in this statement from astronaut Nicole Mann in 2018.
But to be up there with the crew, it feels kind of surreal, that you realize that when you're going to be there within a year with the real vehicle there climbing on board. That
year came and went, along with another, and there is still no launch date in sight for Boeing. The company has also had troubles with its own parachutes, a landing technique NASA mastered back in the 1960s. But its capsules were smaller and lighter, easier to land with parachutes. Boeing's biggest setback came last December, the first time the Starliner headed for space.
Vehicle system engineer, go. Anomaly chief, go.
And liftoff. The rise of Starliner.
Some 20 minutes after liftoff, the capsule, built for astronauts but flying with no one on board in this test launch, was supposed to fire its engines to enable it to reach the space station. The engine firing did not happen on time, and the Starliner failed to reach the station.
The spacecraft was not on the timer we expected her to be on, and that was a surprise. We don't know why.
The result? The Starliner is grounded, while engineers start from scratch in some respects to program it to operate safely and reliably. The test flight must be repeated late this year. The first Starliner astronaut flight is put off till sometime next year. And so the spotlight is on SpaceX. So is the pressure in more ways than one. NASA is running out of rides to the space station. It has had to reduce the crew on the station from 6 to 3. The U.S. could buy more Soyuz launches from the Russians, but they're jacking up the price again to $90 million. Besides, 9 years between space flights launched from America is long enough.
We think about Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and then Space Shuttle. Those are really the 4 times in history when we have put humans on brand new spacecraft. This is an important mission for the United States of America. We need to retain access to the International Space Station.
And Doug Hurley will be first, while his old commander, Chris Ferguson, watches on the ground. SpaceX has won the race, and Hurley and Bob Behnken are set to inaugurate this new era of commercial spaceflight, in which it is yet to be proven that flying commercial is cheaper or safer.
It's just, it's an incredible honor to be back here at Kennedy Space Center. Bob and I started out, our first astronaut jobs were here at Kennedy.
Nobody wants to see this mission to be a success more than us.
They are the men on the mission. Why these 2 astronauts made the cut to fly first. Their stories when we return. The next chapter of American space exploration is ready for takeoff.
Just excited to be back in the great state of Florida at the Kennedy Space Center.
And Central Florida figures prominently in the success of America's intergalactic future.
I think we should really do our very best to become a multi-planet species and to extend consciousness beyond Earth. And we should do it now.
But first, the mission at hand.
This will be the 5th time in American history when we have launched American astronauts on a brand new vehicle. We did it in Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. We did it with the space shuttles, and now we're going to do it on a SpaceX Falcon rocket with a Crew Dragon space capsule. And it's these gentlemen that are going to have the opportunity to pioneer once more for the United States of America in what is this new era in human spaceflight.
Here again is Jim Payne.
Welcome back to Ready for Launch, America's return to spaceflight. This new era of spaceflight comes with a new class of astronauts. Earlier this year, NASA officially added 11 new astronauts to its ranks, men and women who could be stationed on the ISS and see through the Artemis program, aiming to get us back to the moon and potentially Mars. But for this most immediate mission, NASA has tapped 2 veteran astronauts to take the test flight aboard Crew Dragon. If something should go awry, you want experience in the cockpit. Michelle Imperato introduces us to the 2 men putting everything on the line to advance the United States space goals.
History will be made and the world will be watching when NASA and SpaceX launch humans into orbit for the first time in 9 years from American soil.
This is a great time in America to be able to do this again, and Bob and I are honored to be the lucky ones to fly this vehicle.
The 2 astronauts on board that Crew Dragon spacecraft for the Demo 2 mission, Colonels Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, veteran NASA astronauts, former military servicemen, and close friends. Their paths have been intertwined for years. Hurley and Behnken were in the same class of astronauts here at Kennedy Space Center.
And this is a very, very special place to us. It's almost like a home away from home.
They worked on the space shuttles together, preparing crews for space exploration. They even experienced the 2003 Columbia disaster together. They were the 2 set to greet the returning crew on the runway, but they never got the chance as the shuttle disintegrated upon re-entry into the atmosphere, killing all 7 crew members. Hurley and Behnken would be by each other's side that day and countless times over the years. They were even at each other's weddings. All of that history, the highs and the lows, make them the ultimate team to mark an historic and long-awaited moment in time.
As graduates of military test pilot schools, if you gave us one thing that we could have put on our list of dream jobs that we would have gotten to have someday, it would have been to be aboard a new spacecraft, be conducting a test mission aboard that spacecraft, and Doug and I get that chance to do it. So we're thankful for that opportunity.
Doug Hurley was born in Endicott, New York, October 21st, 1966. Destined for greatness. He spent 24 years serving in the military as a test and fighter pilot for the Marine Corps.
Booster ignition.
Since being selected as an astronaut in the class of 2000, Hurley has piloted 2 missions to space.
Houston, Endeavour, roll program.
First in July 2009 aboard the Endeavour, and then again in July 2011 aboard Atlantis for the final flight of America's space shuttle program.
I happen to have been one of the 4 astronauts that landed here almost 9 years ago in T-38s on the 4th of July of 2011 to close out the space shuttle program. So it's incredibly humbling to be here to start out the next launch from the United States.
Hurley remains humble, even as many compare him to legendary first shuttle astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen.
I certainly wouldn't, compare anything that I do with something that those guys did. They're true great American heroes.
Bob Behnken's story starts in St. Anne, Missouri on July 7th, 1970. His passion for space sparked as just a young boy.
I'm a child that basically got inspired to pursue the path that I did from the Voyager program, probably back in the day, to see those probes fly past the planets going through our solar system, and to get the encyclopedia out and the annual update and read all the details and see all the really cool pictures that NASA was providing, and that created an interest in science and engineering for me.
And Behnken followed his childhood dreams, but first he earned his PhD and a decorated military career. He was a flight test engineer with the U.S. Air Force. Like Hurley, Behnken has also been part of 2 previous missions to space. The first in March of 2008 and the second in February of 2010, both aboard Endeavour. He's already spent more than 700 hours in space. 37 of those hours were spent on spacewalks, something he's looking forward to hopefully doing again this time around.
I would be, not probably a real astronaut if I didn't say I was looking forward to the possibility of doing some spacewalks on the upcoming mission. But at the same time, I have done several spacewalks, and so I do recognize that as we lay out the mission priorities kind of going forward, our number one thing is to get Dragon checked out and get ready for those next crews, then to help out Chris Cassidy, and then if there are some cool things that we can do and help out Space Station at the same time, like those spacewalks, that'll be some icing on the cake for us.
Hurley and Behnken not only met each other while training to be astronauts, they both also met their wives. All 4 of them were selected to be astronauts in the class of 2000. Hurley married fellow NASA astronaut Karen Nyberg, and Behnken married astronaut Megan MacArthur. And both men now have sons in elementary school, which is different from when they took their last journeys into space.
And so I'm really excited to share the mission with him and have him have a chance to be old enough at 6 to see it, and share it with me when I get home and while I'm on orbit.
The dynamic duo have been preparing for this inaugural flight for years.
I do look forward, if I do get that chance, for getting to tell Doug what to do during the robotics operations. If he's flying me around on the arm, it's always fun to kind of have that hierarchy where you are the number one priority at a given point during a spacewalk for the arm operator. And he says, yes, sir, I think, when you ask for something from a robotics operator. So anyway, that'll be fun, a little banter between us if we get to that point in the mission.
They stay relaxed when talking about their upcoming mission, one that will kick off a new era of space travel, one they know comes with great risk.
Your personal life, you're trying to make sure everything's taken care of on the ground for your family.
Their bravery paves the way for other astronauts and possibly even civilian spaceflight.
Now we're not just launching the rockets, we're making the rockets that are being launched. We're making products that go on the rocket that's being launched.
There's a new marketplace developing way up in space. How Central Florida is positioning itself as the gateway to the galaxy to cash in on that emerging economy.
So much has changed along the Space Coast since the Space Shuttle was retired. Rarely does a week go by without a launch. And it's not just NASA, which has its sights set on the moon and beyond. It's brand new commercial space companies with their eyes on the heavens to make a whole lot of money.
Having fired the imagination of a generation, a ship like no other, its place in history secured, the Space Shuttle pulls into port for the last time. Its voyage at an end.
And with the 133rd landing in shuttle history, STS-135 and its crew brought the Space Shuttle era to an end after more than 30 years of flights.
So they made us very proud.
And it would usher in nearly a decade of uncertainty for the Space Coast.
A lot of people, including myself, even before the shuttle retirement, said, God, we should do more than this.
Linda Weatherman is CEO of the Space Coast Economic Development Commission, courting the next wave of the aerospace industry. When the shuttle was retired, the Space Coast lost 9,135 jobs directly tied to the spacecraft. The ripple effect across the region claimed close to 30,000 jobs.
I think by losing that, gave us a chance to almost maybe a fresh start mentally in a way, I don't know, or knowing that we better go and get after as much as we can.
We have more than replaced those jobs in aerospace. They're different than the shuttle workforce.
Frank DeBello heads up Space Florida, working behind the scenes to seal the deals that bring aerospace companies here. 4 years after the shuttle retired, the first commercial rocket landed back on Earth in Central Florida.
Liftoff.
Now there are multiple takeoffs and almost concurrent launches, a myriad of landings and rocket reuse, all to support the emergence of a nearly limitless economy in the atmosphere.
You either move rapidly, innovate, and keep ahead of the competition, or you lose.
You think about the evolution where we've come just on from a place that used to only launch. Now we're launching and we're manufacturing. We have satellite production. So that's in many ways a metaphor of rising up and the diversifying the economy. It's really exciting.
Commercial companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are innovating and adapting new technologies and techniques faster than the government ever could.
Engines ignition.
Central Florida is now the epicenter of commercial space, with the aerospace companies fueling that growth. There is a competitive advantage for companies to locate in the Space Coast, the launch center of the world, the gateway to the universe.
Now we're not just launching the rockets, we're making the rockets that are being launched. We're making products that go on the rocket that's being launched.
The real challenge is now opening up low Earth orbit for multiple vehicles flying and taking people back and forth to orbit to do work.
To fix things, place them up there, gather, do research, to manufacture products and bring them to Earth. Up there is called cislunar, the area between the Earth and the Moon. People are already talking about the cislunar economy. Some experts say the weightless environment will soon be worth $3 trillion a year.
You'll see manned vehicles and robotic support vehicles going up into space to support we estimate 12,000 satellites that are going to be launched over this next decade. And that's what starts this cislunar economy that I think is really the bellwether for the next decade.
Telecommunications, remote sensing, digital imaging of the Earth, and supporting research and manufacturing. The on-ramp of the highway to the cislunar economy is Central Florida.
Being able to go up into specially man-tended platforms in space to do research for corporations, and whether that's biomedical research or materials research or crop research, and be able to take the lessons or the value-added product and bring it back down to Earth. And we want Florida to be the ground node for that cislunar economy.
Nearly 80 companies are in talks to move to the Space Coast. The latest success story is Ariane Supersonic Business Jets moving its headquarters to Melbourne International Airport, a $300 million campus bringing at least 675 jobs to the same airport that's now home to Embraer executive jets. They join other businesses like Northrop Grumman, Collins Aerospace, Lockheed Martin Fleet Ballistic Missiles.
These are very sophisticated, skilled labor, blue-collar jobs, working with composites, working with AI-driven robotics, working with new kinds and new forms of welding and assembly work. And that is a talented and coveted workforce all over the world.
But I think our biggest challenge and the one we need to focus on as a community is workforce.
We have a lot of companies now that are coming together and working together on the challenges of the workforce piece of the manned spaceflight.
Marcy Murphy is president of Career Source Brevard, which matches local people with job opportunities. She works with 75 local aerospace aviation companies like SpaceX to make sure they have the workers they need to grow and compete in a cislunar economy. Career Source Brevard recruits local people and develops specific training and apprenticeship programs.
But the technician type of positions that we're now starting to see that the companies are looking for require a little bit of training, but not necessarily degrees, and it's more competency-based training. And so we have a lot of citizens here in Brevard County that can now participate and be a part of the program.
There is more production and assembly work at Kennedy Space Center than ever before. It requires much more than roads and schools and housing and recreation and clean beaches and rivers. Companies work hard to attract a sought-after labor force, and quality of life here has never been more important.
If we want to keep up with the need to grow this economy, we need to build the live, work, play environment to go along with it.
Cislunar success is a shiny, sparkly attraction. The sky isn't the limit, it's the destination. But the space marketplace is downright cruel. It requires mass production of satellites and payloads to save money, regular launches of reusable rockets to drive down costs, and way more astronauts will fly in this next decade than in 30 years of shuttles to low Earth orbit, the lunar surface and beyond, flying U.S. astronauts on U.S. vehicles launched from U.S. soil.
There's no reason why Florida, as a global spaceport, a global trade port, can't be the platform for that next generation of space-related economy.
Any idea how long this could take?
I think you're going to see it open up visibly in this next decade.
So how's the future look to you?
I think if there's any community that's situated as best as possible, it's the Space Coast.
The President's made it clear that we're going to accomplish this goal by any means necessary.
Going back to the moon, the next cosmic milestone. And who else has their sights set on the lunar surface? Next.
Welcome back to Ready for Launch. We are counting down here at Kennedy Space Center, where every U.S. space milestone has taken flight. After decades of our government successfully leading our nation's space aspirations and activities, why go private? WESH 2 space expert Dan Billow is back with us.
You know, there are really two reasons for launching commercially. One, it's intended to save money, and two, it lets NASA go on to bigger things. Much bigger things. NASA wants to go to the moon and Mars, and by the way, so does SpaceX. Let's look at the possibility of getting to the moon in 4 years.
This way?
You couldn't blame Christina Cook for asking directions. After all, she hadn't been on Earth for almost a year.
At the bottom?
328 days to be exact. Her record-breaking flight ending in February is counted as another step toward NASA's goal of returning to the moon to stay and moving on to Mars. That's the real purpose of the space station, which has been occupied for about 20 years now. This is how the human species is learning to live off the planet. And this is how the United States will get us there. It's called the Space Launch System, or SLS.
Its unprecedented power and capabilities will send American astronauts farther than ever before. It's the largest rocket ever built by the agency and a monumental engineering feat in its own right. It is a testament to American enterprise and ingenuity, with more than 1,000 large and small businesses in 44 states contributing to the design and the assembly. The SLS rocket is, in fact, America's rocket.
21 stories tall and fitted with 4 engines harvested from the old space shuttles, the SLS first stage will be equipped with booster rockets, also modified from space shuttle days. It'll be topped with a brand new Orion spacecraft for trips to the moon and someday Mars. And it will launch from a former space shuttle launch pad, 39B, where the breaking dawn was recently shattered by a rumble of a different kind. The water deluge is a test of the system that absorbs the powerful sound waves of a launching rocket so they don't damage the rocket on the way up. Just this month, NASA has declared the launch pad complete, ready for flights to the moon. Even the swing arms on the launch tower have been tested. The first SLS rocket is at a NASA center in Mississippi for a test of its rocket engines. After that, it'll come to KSC for a test flight without astronauts next year. When astronauts do fly, they'll head for a mini space station NASA wants to build near the moon. From there, they'll board one of 2 landers that are on the drawing boards now. One lander would be a tall 3-stage affair, dwarfing the Apollo 11 moon landers. Another would be more low-slung, allowing the astronauts to easily step out, closer to the ground. Teams designing and building these landers were spun up in just 6 months, a quarter of the time it would normally take. The Trump administration is promising so much money to get them finished on time that even the NASA administrator can't believe it.
One of the most noteworthy features of the 2021 fiscal budget is the $3.3 billion President Trump has directed for development of the human landing system.
But the 5-year moon landing plan announced last year is already bogging down. Congress did not fully fund it last fall, and the coronavirus has stopped work on the SLS rocket, delaying its first launch. But the administration is suggesting it will have no patience with problems like these. It is holding fast to the timeline, which now shows only 4 years till boots on the moon.
But let me be clear. The President's made it clear that we're going to accomplish this goal by any means necessary. In order to succeed, we are going to continue to focus on the mission over the means. In 4 years' time, we return American astronauts to the moon and make sure that the next man and the first woman on the moon are Americans. Our administration is absolutely committed to this goal.
That could open the door for, guess who? SpaceX is not only about to try to become the first in 9 years to fly astronauts from the Space Coast, it wants a piece of the moon and Mars business too. SpaceX's proposal for a moon lander would be to fly its planned Starship all the way from the Earth to the moon, with no expensive space station needed along the way. The company is building Starships in Texas and has built Starship parts or prototypes in Cocoa in Brevard County. SpaceX could even attempt a mission to the moon or Mars by itself as a private concern.
I think we should really do our very best to become a multi-planet species and to extend consciousness beyond Earth.
SpaceX founder Elon Musk is using all the billions he's pocketing from NASA to build his gigantic Starships. The Starship would be the most ambitious space vehicle ever built, far outdistancing anything NASA has done. 100 people could fly and live on a Starship, Musk says, and the fuel and supplies they'd need could be rapidly supplied by multiple launches of its first stage, the Falcon Super Heavy.
You can fly the booster 20 times a day, you fly the ship 3 or 4 times a day. That's what I mean by reusability.
And that's the real purpose of SpaceX. The upstart visionary company has come out of nowhere to beat the aerospace giants and become the organization that returns astronaut launches to American soil. But its plans are much bigger than that. Starships are intended not only to fly to Mars, but to colonize it, something that has never been possible in all of human history until right now.
The window has been open. Only now, after 4.5 billion years, is that window open. There's a long time to wait, and it might not stay open for long. I think we should really do our very best to become a multi-planet species and to extend consciousness beyond Earth, and we should do it now.
Witnessing the history that will unfold here is something that Central Floridians and space fans around the globe will be clamoring to see. Packed beaches and causeways are the norm for a manned space mission, but these are not normal times. Because of coronavirus, NASA is asking the crowds to watch from home using television or the internet. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey has taken a different stand, offering up the county's beaches and parks to host socially distant in-person viewing. Deputies will even hand out masks to the masses who gather. If you choose to view from home, WESH 2 has the best seats saved for you. Join us starting at 3 p.m. for a special extended newscast focused on the launch and mission. It will be anchored by me, Meredith McDonough, and space expert Dan Billa. This new era of spaceflight has the potential to change life here in Central Florida and all across the planet. Thank you for joining us as we prepare to witness history, and have a great night.